Hoy vamos a hablar de las cosas que nosotros estamos haciendo a arrestar a las personas que están vendiendo drogas en Albuquerque. We're here today to talk about some of the operations that we're conducting in reference to individuals who are selling narcotics and some of the things that we're seeing along Central. As chief of police, I'm out in this community almost daily, and I consistently have individuals speak to me. And last fall, we started these operations, and we started the process of working on Central. I heard loud and clear that our community was sick and tired of driving down Central and this Central looking the way that it did. So we really curbed up our operations sometime in August. It went through September. And then we made the decision in October that we were going to carry that warrants and shoplifting operations on through the end of the year. Earlier today, I met with representatives from a local strip mall, and they indicated a big thank you to the Albuquerque Police Department and its officers for the work and how they've seen the decrease in shoplifting in their area. And along Central, you see a lot of businesses that are thankful that we're out there each and every day. But we know that we're also moving individuals. But I've heard the community over and over again speak about the fact that they were tired of the narcotics that were occurring on Central, and they wanted us to do something about the narcotics dealers. We began the operation, and we talked about it a couple weeks ago. This actually began in January, right after we had an officer shot outside of Adams Food Market in December. We wanted to put more resources. We wanted to start hitting narcotics more, and we used our Central Narcotics Unit. Contrary to popular belief, we do have a narcotics unit. And we started utilizing our gun violence suppression unit, which is basically another unit of ours that works on some of these problem places to target Central. And one of the key arrests that we're going to be hearing about today is Mr. Casillas here. You look at this individual and take him into custody, the impact that it has on the city of Albuquerque and the citizens. At the time of his arrest, a stolen Sig Sauer P365 handgun, a tan Glock 19X with a full auto switch, 3,200 fentanyl pills, 685 grams of methamphetamine, and the list goes on and on. Somewhere near 200 rounds of ammunition on this individual at the time of their arrest. And these are the exact individuals that we're focusing to take off the streets, because we know that a lot of these street level confrontations turn violent when one individual is armed, and we're going to continue to work these operations. One other key arrest was Daniel Size. He was taken into custody. A firearm was recovered during one of these Central operations. His firearm actually came back with 7 NIBIN hits that we're still working on. So we're committed to working on Central, committed to arresting drug dealers, committed to making sure that we do everything we can to take firearms off of Central. I want to thank all of our specialized units and our uniformed officers who are out there every day risking their lives dealing with these individuals who are extremely violent, who are armed to the T, and who are out there and a lot of times do not want to go to jail or are not afraid to elude, resist, and to basically make it very difficult for officers to take into custody. So with that, I think we're going to move on to Deputy Chief Vega, or we're going to the video? Deputy Chief Vega, so thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is George Vega. I'm the Deputy Chief over the Investigative Bureau for the Albuquerque Police Department. I just wanted to highlight some of the stats that we had for this operation. Like Chief was saying, we had our gun violence suppression team out here, and we also had our Central Narcotics team. So when we talk about the operation that we did, I'll just give you some quick stats. We had 28 felony arrests and cleared 24 felony warrants. Warrants range from robbery, child abuse, burglary, and trafficking, and 4 felony warrants that were out of Colorado. So we really focused in on the Central Corridor area, and we brought in our Central Narcotics team and our gun violence suppression team. When I talk about our Central Narcotics team, the one thing that I really want to point out is our narcotics team is fully staffed, 1, and then 2 is a force multiplier. We have them as task force officers with the DEA. And so we are working with the DEA on any of these cases that we need to take federal. And so our detectives within our Central Narcotics team are task force with the DEA. When I talk about our gun violence suppression unit, I want to really focus on that because we teamed them up with our Central Narcotics team for a reason. They focus on gun violence, but they also focus on gang violence. And a lot of, some of the members of this team were part of our old gang unit. And what I could say about my history is I was a gang detective for 4 years. I also went back as the gang sergeant. So when I look at what our gun violence suppression unit does, is a lot of the same type of operations that they're doing. But we had to change it a little bit because we did see a shift in the way our gangs were operating. They weren't some of our traditional gangs that we were used to seeing in the early 2000s. What we're seeing now is a lot of these kids, a lot of these groups are more group involved, not necessarily gang involved. So we wanted to make sure that we were focusing on gun violence, but we still had a team in place that could focus on the crimes that the gangs and our groups were committing in the city. So with that, I'll turn it over to Commander Bernard so he could talk a little bit more.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeff Bernard. I'm the commander of the Investigative Services Division, which oversees our Narcotics and Gun Violence Suppression Unit. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the operations and why we chose some of the areas that we did. But basically, the way our operations worked is we looked at two different aspects of things. We had identified problem areas where we had different things going on, like in the one residence where we had the 7 NIBIN hits, we had a large amount of shot spotters going off in that area, and we were able to work with other investigative units and figure out that we had a robbery offender there, do surveillance, and then be able to do a search warrant on that residence, take that firearm, apprehend that subject as well as some other people in that house. We also had some residences where we were seeing frequent activity, or we were seeing narcotics tips come in that are really close to that central corridor, where it looked like basically we were having people go to those houses frequently. They would solicit the narcotics from there, come back to Central. They would even sometimes purchase narcotics from that area and then go back and sell them along Central. The other aspect of our operations was just proactively addressing things when we saw various narcotic activity. So in reference to the Charles Cassius case, that was an instance where we just were in the area. We happened to see a vehicle that appears to be doing some activity very consistent with narcotics trafficking. They're basically going over to various spots. They stay there for a few minutes. People come visit them for a couple of minutes, and you'll see them leave the area. So when we tried to stop that vehicle to see what was going on, we turned into this large arrest with several narcotics. In addition to that, as Deputy Chief Vega was saying, while our narcotics officers work with the DEA, we also partner our gun violence suppression unit with the ATF. So we have a collateral officer there that's a ATF task force officer, and we also work with their agents on that. So any of these gun crimes that we get, we can prosecute federally if we want to cross those charges that meet the federal thresholds. The other thing that we're looking at when we're doing these things is we look at what kind of activity shows street level dealing and the things that we see with that. So we're constantly looking to see where we have a large amount of aggravated assaults, where we're having shootings, and we often see that these intersect with our narcotics crimes, which is why we chose some of these areas that we did. And we're trying to focus on those to reduce the violent crime in the area because we often see that nexus involved with these things. In addition, we're starting to see more instances where the narcotics trafficking is partnered with people that are having firearms. So we've seen a lot more shootings resulted in what we'd call drug rips or just some sort of altercation that goes on during these interactions. It's leading to someone getting seriously injured, oftentimes even leading to a homicide. So we're going to continue to focus on the narcotics activity in these areas. And we're going to also continue these proactive operations along any other areas that we see where we're seeing these signs of activity. With that, I'll turn it back over to Francesca.
Just so you guys know, in reference to this one, there was a pursuit that happened after it. I don't know how many of you covered it, but we do have video available where he actually crashed out after the pursuit, so we can share that after. But I'll go ahead and turn it over, Chief, for question and answer.
And just in closing real quick before we go to questions, I know there's a lot of questions at times, and people bring up, where is our APD staffing level wise, and there's this misinformation out there that we no longer have a narcotics unit. That's completely wrong. We just heard what our narcotics unit did the past month, and we recognize that gang units is an outdated concept. Gang units from the past don't work the same way they worked. I was a police officer in the late 90s. the 2000s till 2014, and gangs were very structured. They were very tied to neighborhood or historical groups that they were part of, and we started to see this evolution since 2014. And we now recognize that some of these gangs intermingle nowadays, and it's not about the gang doing gang activities. It's about the group and whoever they're associating with the time, and that's why we've had to modify our approach. But we still basically have all the same members of gang unit doing the functions of a gang unit, but we've just branded it different so we could really focus on gun violence, as that's the biggest thing that we see coming from them, and that we can also focus on groups and not be stuck on the fact that it's a group instead of a gang and pawn that responsibility off to another unit. So we're trying to stay consistent, we're trying to stay proactive, and we will continue to push forward on these operations and continue to have these arrests. But you saw it, 28 felony arrests, a lot of it related to narcotics dealings. Either the individuals are taken into custody because they were observed, surveillance was done, and they could see that their activities were consistent, and we had some good results. With that, we'll go to questions. Questions, we'll make it easy. Yes,
How many
well,
officers are dedicated to this operation?
how many officers do you have on each team?
So our narcotics team has 8 detectives, and our gun violence suppression unit has 6 detectives currently.
So 8 on narcotics team and 6 on the gun violence suppression unit.
And so far this year, how many arrests have you guys made, whether it comes to narcotics or firearms on Central?
You know what, I'll have to get those, we'll get those numbers to you, but I can tell you as a city, last year we were really lucky. We had an increase, I think, of almost 25% in felony warrants being cleared. And you look at this is another one of those cases of an individual out there who should have had a warrant, that should have already been in jail. And last year's increase of felony warrants cleared, this year we're, so far year to date, we're almost 40% above where we were last year. So last year, 25% increase for the year, and this year, 3 months in, we're writing a 40% increase in felony warrants. So our officers are out there doing an extreme amount of work and are very motivated, doing a good job in taking people into custody. Another one?
Yeah, and I know it's all on Central, but you said you're really kind of focusing on the Central corridor. Is that more of a hot spot? Is that why, or are there hot spots?
Yes, we know that we get a tremendous amount of community concern from Central. Actually today, and I haven't broke the news to the deputy chiefs, I'm going to ask them to expand that to include Louisiana up to Manal. I met with some representatives from the area around the malls, and they brought up that they've seen an increase in individuals in the area unhoused and some of the crimes that's associated with it, and they asked us if we could devote some presence. So I will be asking them to expand that central operation to include Louisiana to Manal.
And what would you say, I guess, is making these operations successful, whether it's technologies or just certain things y'all are doing within the team operation itself?
I think there's several things that are making it successful. Number one, we have great technology that is helping us pinpoint locations. Number two, we have very hard-working officers who are motivated. Many times you hear people talk about the morale at the department is going down. You know, I push back on that idea because of the fact that if you look at the increase in arrests in 2023, and we've seen those numbers, and the decrease in use of force in 2023, and then you look at the increase in numbers like I just shared with you for warrants being cleared in 2024, that is not indications of people who are not happy and not doing their job. Those are indications of people who are working hard and representing the Albuquerque Police Department well.
Last question, sorry.
Yes.
So since some of these are kind of been working with the DA, what makes a case, I guess, turn federal? So when kind of looking at this, I mean, me reading this as a normal person, I mean, it seems like a lot. Was this enough to turn federal, or how does that kind of?
You know, the key thing here is I think there's a couple things here is if this individual is a convicted felon, the possession of a firearm would make this a case available for federally being adopted. But there's other key things. The amount of drugs plus the fact that their person is in possession of a firearm makes it possible that we can make this federal. But this is the big one that we've been talking about that we've seen lately. Full auto and a silencer. Those are two things that are restricted by federal law that ATF enforces that makes this a very strong federal cases. And the amount of time that somebody gets for being in possession of a machine gun is probably one of the strongest laws that we have federally on the books. And these are the exact laws that we want to transfer over to our federal partners. So that's why it's important that we continue to have these strong relationships, strong relationship with ATF, strong relationship with FBI, and we make sure that we work to get every case we can into the federal system for these types of individuals so they go away for the appropriate amount of time. Yes.
Can you just talk a little bit more about Charles Gusais? Francesca mentioned that there was a chase involved. Just kind of, can you delve into, you know, how you guys were able to track him down and how you guys got him?
You know, and I think I'll turn those specifics over to Commander Bernard if he has them. If not, I'll have to get them. But I know, like he stated earlier, they were observing the individual's behavior. A lot of times our undercovers are out there looking and watching for individuals they believe are involved in narcotics dealing, and there's a variety of things they could do. If they're able to conduct a traffic stop and recover this, we could make a quick case simple. If we need to start getting undercover officers in there or any individual who's an informant for us to go make those purchases, then that takes a little bit longer, but I'll let Jeff talk about it.
So on this incident, after we saw the activity that was consistent with trafficking, we actually tried to have a MARC unit just do a traffic stop on it, at which point the subject fled. At that point, we did not pursue it, technically speaking. What we did is we covertly surveyed it until at a time that we felt like we could safely apprehend the subject. So when the subject was no longer driving aggravated or anything that would put anyone in danger, we actually spike belted the vehicle. As we were setting up the spike belts, the subject actually tried to flip around in a median, and he actually struck a vehicle during that period of time. But so essentially what happened is we just looked for a safe termination point. And that's what we do often with vehicles like this, is we try to figure out one of those things, and then we'll use some of the tools that we have, like the spike belt or the grappler device that we've received, and we'll use that for the apprehension after we know they're not willing to stop for us.
And then, sorry, to follow up, you mentioned that he crashed into another car. Do you guys know if that person in the other car was okay?
The person was okay. He did have some minor injuries.
Any other questions? I just want to thank everybody for being here today, and if you have any other questions or anything, follow-up that you have, just get a hold of either Rebecca or Francesca, and I thank you for being here and your time. Thanks.